Hello and welcome back to Dicebreaker. I'm Wills, and we are taking a look today at a game that we've been sponsored to have a quick read through and talk through of. This is Roll of Fate, a fusion of a trading card game and role-playing game. And I'm actually joined by Zane, who is basically the creator of the game, the CEO of Roll of Fate. Zane, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what is Roll of Fate?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Roll of Fate is my unique way of blending TCG and RPG. I have taken the deck building component, which is very dear to my heart. I grew up with deck building games. I did start with games like MTG, and I played Pokemon, but one of my favorite games was the original Dragon Ball Z card game back in the day. So there are the players will see a few influences throughout Roll of Fate that I've just taken inspiration from some of my games. And I was always a big Dungeons & Dragons player when I was young, so I tried to take all of the different aspects of these games and what I liked about them and what I didn't, and I took what I didn't and moved it out, and I took what I did like and tried to do a reinvention of sorts.
So this is going to be, for those who have the first time seeing this is kind of like a marrying of all of your favorite aspects of role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons with all of those kind of like deck building and like synergy building and combo building kind of like minute-to-minute gameplay elements that you would see from a trading card game.
Yes, sir, that is correct. It does. The game plays in phases, and we can cover that here in a little bit, but yep.
Sweet. All right, well, do you want to take us a little bit through how the game works, what players are going to be up to, and just sort of tell us about what the kind of like core mechanics are and what it is that players are going to be doing on their turns.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first I will start with one of the topics that seem to be a little confusing through the write-up. There are 3 different ways to play Roll of Fate. One being the PvP function, which is 4v4 on a battlefield, on a battleground map. It can be played with less, but in the 4v4, what it would look like is players come to the table with a deck that they have pre-constructed from their own collection. You choose a role, which are Roll of Fate's rendition of classes. There are currently 16 of them, which will be there at release. But the game, everything in my Book of Secrets, which is where all my lore and everything is written out, I have the game currently slotted for 60, and there will be more over time. So as the game progresses down the line, there will be plenty of options for people to build decks around their favorite roles.
Roles are quite a central thing in the kind of like building of your deck as well, right? So I've got the Dreadlord in front of me right now. It's for those that are sort of maybe Magic the Gathering fans, it might be kind of similar to something like Commander, where it's kind of that thing that you're building your deck around and the specific skills that they have. And also, I'm assuming like the cards that they'll have access to?
Yes, sir, that's correct. The roles, so just to take a note on that, Roll of Fate has universal card playability.
Mm-hmm.
There are no restrictions as to what cards any role may use, but the cards are only restricted by specific equipment. So, for example, a Dreadlord, most people would look at a Dreadlord and say, this guy probably shouldn't or can't cast magic. But if the Dreadlord has a piece of equipment on that acts as a magical catalyst, he now has access to spells. Cool. Or a hex catalyst, which gives him access to casting curses. So that is how building a deck works around the role itself. Each role has their own unique signature ability, which is a once per game. Some players have used it in terms of reference to being akin to an ultimate, but it's not really like an ult. It's just an ability that's theirs that they can use. I guess if I could relate it to D&D, a once per day effect. You get this one time in the game. And then they have a signature passive, which is always active, but it is unique to that specific role.
So we've been sent over some products. Obviously, I've been looking for it as we've been playing and getting an idea of how everything works. That we've got 4 roles here. How many roles are we going to see at the sort of like the launch of the game? How many roles are people going to be able to like get their teeth into just as they're starting?
So at launch, they'll have access to 16. There's 4 promotional roles, which the Dreadlord is a pre-release promotional role. but those pre-release promotional roles will actually roll over the launch date for about 3 months. That's still to be determined, but that's about the timeline that I'm going to extend those for, just so that way we can get the name out there and give players a chance to get these promotional roles. After that, it will drop down to the 12 core roles, and over time, more roles will release. Those promotional roles will return at a later date, but they'll only be available in the reward store for the game. So the Fabrinium, which is the game's currency that you can win through tournaments, you can win through events, and that's what you would need to sink your teeth back into those promotional roles and then gain them for your collection if you did not grab them prior to release or prior to the date that they disappear from promotional status.
Yeah, so that Fabrinium is kind of an interesting thing, right? So this is so Roll of Fate, for again, obviously this is going to be a lot of people's first time experience with this. The kind of like lore, the world, the even perhaps some of the card abilities have like an open-ended nature to them, right? There's a sort of element of influence that the community playing the game is hopefully going to be able to expand on, sort of like the way in which the story builds, and maybe even, for example, what cards get unlocked. So could you expand a little bit on like what Fabrinium is and how the community is going to be able to interact with the game and how it's made up?
Sure. So Fabrinium was originally my thought process of a bonus currency, like a reward currency. Well, then when my mind started running and thinking, hey, I got this official campaign that I'll be streaming and allowing players, selected players that play through the official campaign at any given point, to run and push the trajectory of the lore, how can I give the community a way to interact with that? Well, Fabrinium is that bonus currency. They'll be gaining it through tournaments and other different aspects of the game. The game will feature a subscription service, so if you're one of those guys who can't get to your local game shop every month, but you do just genuinely enjoy playing Roll of Fate with your friends, you can subscribe to the game and get monthly product. So the product will automatically come to you, and we decided to tie that Fabrinium in with that subscription model if it interests you. Do you need to subscribe to play Roll of Fate? Absolutely not. There are tons of other ways to gain the Fabrinium. But one of the core aspects that I wanted to highlight with Fabrinium was when I was younger playing trading card games, being a young kid, the population that played Magic the Gathering when I was young were quite older. A lot of the D&D players were quite older. So me going to a card store, I would go in and I would see cards that I wanted for my deck, but I had no way to obtain them because, well, I was 13, and if I wanted to get a card, by the time I went and mowed my neighbor's lawn to earn some cash to maybe buy it from them, they had probably traded it already. So I thought, how do I get, aside from cash and or cards that I may not have, what's another way that I can allow players to trade? So that's where Fabrinium came in. I thought, hey, maybe I can create a currency that will have a reward store tied to it and limited items, so it's a currency that people should always want, no matter what their collection looks like, because they never know what kind of limited items I'm going to come out with in the store. I might have some new art drawn playmat, or something that players just have to have, or an autographed playmat, or something of that nature that goes into the reward store. So there's always a reason to collect the Fabrinium. And to add another dynamic layer to that, the official campaign will actually allow players to utilize that Fabrinium in the official campaign as their currency to kind of help keep their party alive.
Yeah, so this is one of the sort of more unique things I think about Roll of Fate that we should talk about a little bit more. So as you sort of alluded to earlier, there's like 3 different play modes. I think the standard mode that most people I think will be most familiar with is the PvP, right? So
Absolutely.
It's the way in which most card games play. I build a deck, you build a deck, and we see what happens when they put them up against each other. But there's actually 2 different play modes that are relatively unique to Roll of Fate, especially I think the player versus creator mode. Do you want to sort of expand on that and sort of explain how that works and what it's going to look like for players when the game launches?
When I was playing a lot of MMO games, such as EverQuest being my absolute favorite of all time, and games like World of Warcraft, I always wondered what it would be like if, while raiding, the creator of that boss was actually controlling the boss. So that's what I took the idea from and ran with player versus creator. So player versus creator will have two key facets. One, an official campaign. The official campaign is where I will select players from the community to play in an ongoing campaign against myself, the creator, as the realm shaper, the Roll of Fate's rendition as a dungeon master. And these players, every choice that they make doesn't just affect their campaign, it affects the entire game's lore as a whole. So after this group of players meets their demise, I will choose another group to go through the official campaign, because it's an ever-going, ongoing world. But all the choices that everybody makes before a new team comes in to run the official campaign, they have to deal with the choices that everyone has made before them. So the world essentially never resets. It's almost like an ongoing MMO world that's ever changing, because everyone who comes through before you has made decisions that have lasting effects.
Those lasting effects, I'm assuming, will affect people just playing the game, right? Even perhaps not even aware of those effects having affected their game if they're not watching that campaign, for example.
Yes, sir. Those effects do have ripples, because just as an example, some of the players could choose to kill a monarch in one of my realms, and players killing that monarch may activate a chain of events that has me create a card that was already in my lineup, and that might go into the next expansion set of the cards, because they have now pushed the lore in a specific way. A new card has been put into the next expansion set of cards. So that way the PvP and the PvE run hand in hand, but they play separately. And that's how I have weaved those two together, is by allowing PvE to affect the cards that will be accessible to PvE in the next expansion set and ongoing forward.
Yeah, so have you got like a few examples of what that might look like? Like, are we talking just sort of like, here is a card that is now available for purchase, or are we talking like sort of like huge changes?
Sure. So some of them could be huge changes. And I guess one of the easiest examples I could give is this. As players push through the official campaign, they will have access to many different realms based on the lore of Roll of Fate and how all of that unfolds, with Roll of Fate taking place in the Everrealm, the Convergence being the town where all the nexus to all worlds. Players have unlimited possibilities of where they can go. So if they uncover a couple of different bosses that I have set in Roll of Fate lore, the players now get to choose as an event to sign up for which boss they would like to fight and try to be the world first to take down this boss. But I have no control of which boss is going to die first. Well, 2 out of those 3 bosses might have global unlocks for the community of new roles to be released. Someone may come in and kill a warlord style of my boss, and it may unlock for the entire community the brawler class to now go into print. And that might be something that you can now go to your local game store and say, hey, there's the brawler starter set. I want the brawler role, so go and grab yourself a brawler role. As far as that being some of the bigger changes, there will also be smaller rewards tied with some of these boss kills as well for world firsts and people who are killing these bosses in an achievement style manner. It could result in alternate art cards being released, which are a little bit smaller of a ripple, or just like we were discussing a minute ago, new cards being added to the next set that's set for release. So that does give the community a little sense of, hey, let's either work together because I really like the idea of the next set having lifesteal cards, so let's try to push the campaign this way. Or, hey, I see that these enemies are using this new combo style card. I wonder if we go that way in the official campaign, if that will start unlocking that new mechanic for the game. So that's a little bit of how it may impact a larger scale too, because it could bring new mechanics on cards into the realm of the PvP game.
So One thing you mentioned that is so that there's kind of like de facto way that this is designed to be played is 4v4.
Yep.
Which is a big number of people for a trading card game. Like, obviously, most people are used to playing 1v1. Like, how does the game play at sort of different player counts?
So the game has been tested all the way down to 1v1. 1v1 is more for, I guess, sparring and just seeing how you have built your deck in a sense of, let's go through the turn counts and let's see what my hands look like. 1v1 will not give you a true immersive experience of what it looks like for your deck to fully function, mainly because Roll of Fate features action cards and reaction cards, and the reaction cards are meant to be played during that particular portion of a player's turn. So if you have an opponent playing action cards against one of your teammates, as long as you have available attunement, which is the resource that you spend to play cards in Roll of Fate, and you're within range, you can intercept that attack and reduce the damage that your opponent is dealing to your ally. 1v1 won't really give you that dynamic because you can only play reaction cards that you have in your hand and that affect yourself. As where you'll get a little bit more of it from 2v2, but as you jump the player count, you really start to see the game merge and play the way it's supposed to, because then you get the dynamic of how players are moving in tandem with their teammates, make sure they're strategically placing themselves on the battleground so that way they're in range to deflect or intercept if they need to, but they're far enough away that they might not be the one who's getting targeted by the next attack. But you can definitely play it with 1v1 just for testing purposes, but 2v2 can play just like a normal game. You're just going to have the slight dynamic loss of the two additional players who may be able to intercept or disrupt attacks that would be coming in.
So yeah, I think we've mainly been focusing on the kind of like TCG elements of this, but obviously this is also kind of a combination of TCG and role-playing game. So could you talk a little bit about sort of how those role-playing game elements kind of come into play? Like I've seen, for example, in front of me, I've got, similar spells that are actually at a different level, for example, and things like that. So how does that work when it comes to gameplay?
So the spells that you were talking about that have the same art on them, but it looks like they have different effects on the cards, those are part of Roll of Fate's dynamic rarity system. Many of the different cards in Roll of Fate have multiple different rarities. Same card art, same general level of effect, but the attunement cost tends to drop the lower rarity of the card. So does the effect, but you can still attain some of the same strategies you might use those cards in. You can achieve them for earlier impact in the game by playing them at a lower cost. That is one of the RPG elements that comes in. Some of the others are that it has the typical tabletop RPG dice rolls. There is a level of luck mixed with some of the combat, but the stats have been balanced in a way that the dice rolls, the game is meant to be fun while being competitive, but the dice rolls also add that extra level of excitement. Like, hey, if I can just roll anything over a 4, we might be able to make this next play happen. And on top of that, being able to give players all of these different roles, while I have created personas that embody these roles on the website and everywhere else in the Roll of Fate lore, players will be able to interact with these heroes that I have created. But my hope is they will take these roles and create just amazing personas of their own. I love the role-playing aspect, and I think it would be rad for people to show up to a PvP match with a background story written for their character and just add a little bit of roleplay to it.
I think one other thing maybe to point out as well is that obviously I have kind of some of the game elements in front of me. We have this kind of like full grid-based battle map. So, these games aren't just going to be kind of played in a kind of abstract, space in your head. You're going to see physical characters moving around, and the position that you're in relation to the position of your opponents, for example, might affect which cards you can use. So, there's a few different elements that kind of merge those two worlds a little bit. Is that something that you're quite excited about seeing people interact with, like the kind of sort of like strategic level play? Like, are you expecting to see teams of 4 that have set up like almost like battle formations and things like that?
Oh, absolutely. To move off onto a slight tangent, I had a demo at a local game shop this weekend. I was telling one of the employees at the game shop while we were sitting on the sidelines talking and watching the game unfold, and I said, I think I see what one of these players is about to do. And being the creator, I know what all the cards do, so I'm watching going, I wonder if he's about to figure this. And sure enough, he did. He moved one of his units behind another player, ended up double knocking him back, but he strategically moved his minion 2 spaces over, so when he knocked his opponent back, his minion would act as a structure on the battleground. So whenever he did the second knockback, the card he used, the latter card he used, the card text read that if your opponent, your target that you're hitting with the card, impacts a structure or unit, it stuns them. Well, it was neat to watch him strategically move his minion there for no other reason than to just act as a structure for him to be able to stun someone on. And I ended up leaning over to the employee and saying, that's exactly how I intended the game to be played right there. That embodies everything that I'm looking for. And just watching them maneuver on the board and utilize cards in a very strategic and tactical manner. So yeah, that was rather exciting to see. So I am excited to see what the community comes up with, but also there's a level of me that's excited to see how and if people can start breaking the game with infinite combos and I don't think I've created any infinite combos, but it will be interesting to see how people layer their attacks and synergize what they can play out of their hands together.
Yeah, I was going to say, you never know what a card game is capable of until you put it in the hands of the masses. So.
Exactly.
We'll
and
see.
there's a part of me that's kind of expecting that. And there's no way, especially as an indie developer, there's no way that I can cover every base, especially this early with the first set of the game coming out. That's something that will likely happen later as I can kind of hone the cards in when I get many more people playing. I've been trying to do as many demos as I can to create those scenarios, but I mean, unless I had a couple thousand players constantly testing it on weekend and giving feedback, I don't think there's any way that I could cover all those bases.
So yeah, I mean, speaking as the sort of solo creator on this, obviously this is, as with many designers I've spoken to in the past, like, I'm sure this is your baby, right? Like this is the thing you're most passionate about. Do you have a favorite card that you've designed out of the set that's available so far?
Do I have a favorite card? I do, and it was I think you might actually have a copy of it. It was the very first card that I created, and it's the Afridi Blood card.
Yes.
It looks like a little blue potion.
Yeah, I believe I have it here. There we go.
That's it. Yep. That currently is my favorite card. Not only because it was the first that I created, but it has lore text. It has lore text on it for the very first character that I ever created lore-wise and storyboarded for. And he will eventually come into play in the official campaign, and players will have many chances to interact with that particular character. But I am extremely excited to see his lore unfold and how players react and even shape his lore, because I do have it written in many different layers. So there's a lot of different ways that his lore can unfold for the players and the masses in the community.
Is that something that people should really be keeping an eye out when they're looking at these cards? Like, are there little Easter eggs that people can find and things like that as well?
Yes. I'm paying attention to the lore text. One of my favorite, and I hope the community doesn't crucify me for this, is one of my favorite movies and books as far as the way it was written and just the level of complexity that was put into Ready Player One, and how I loved how it took the life of a man who built an entire world, and he just littered it with Easter eggs, just tons of things. It almost looked like he was building a massive game out of all of his favorite games, as they kind of showcased in the book and in the movie. And he just littered it with this quest for players to find his 3 keys. Roll of Fate will feature many hidden secrets just like this, paying attention to the card text, paying attention to images on the website. I have paying attention to the merchandise that is sold for Roll of Fate. Yeah, so Dicebreaker actually was sent the very first Easter egg in just blatant context. You guys have it there. It came in the original package, and it is a surprise in the way that it is hidden, but it outright tells the community the first roll that is to be released after the game goes through full launch. So,
oh my god! Well, I think we've
completely missed it. You guys have fun.
Yeah, no, we'll be searching through trying to figure it out now.
that was part of what we hoped. When I was talking with my wife, she said, make sure you mention that and just see if they can find it.
Well, I will email you if we can figure out.
Sure, absolutely.
I'm desperately fanning through cards now as we speak to try and see what's going on. But yeah, no. So that, I mean, yeah, it's. I think we've given a good sort of like explanation of what the game is and how it works. I think the most important thing to say now, Zane, is where can people find it? When is it available? All that sort of stuff.
So right now the Kickstarter is live. You can check us out on Kickstarter. It's at Kickstarter. Search Roll of Fate TCG, or just
we'll have a link in the description of the video as well. Absolutely,
that works fantastic. We do have a website that players can just pre-order the product at rof.gg, GG being like for good game. Mm-hmm. And we are currently working with, I believe they pronounce their name Cardio. It is a new company that builds. Roll of Fate will basically have a play network online that the card database will be there. If players want to test decks and cards in Tabletop Simulator, it has a one-click link to input the source code into Tabletop Simulator so you can go test. That's all slated for end of the year, beginning of next year, but we're trying to get the card database up as soon as possible, and then we are working with our local game shops to get in as many local game shops as we can. I am trying to get the game overseas, like into Europe and the UK, but right now with being an indie game, we have to really pay attention to those shipping prices. I'm trying to find local game shops over there that I can maybe work in the middle with and get the product over there, not have to just charge exorbitant shipping prices. It would be a lot easier to just bulk order product, but if I can get it over there, I'm definitely going to try to. And it will release at the end of the year. Hopefully we're supposed to be at PAX Unplugged, and that should be the official release for the game. The game will be at full release at PAX Unplugged, so if anybody's planning on going there, definitely come by and check it out there, because it'll be complete. Also, bi-monthly, we will be hosting what's known as our Developer Summit, which is where I will be present in Discord for anybody from the community, whether it be player community, local game shop owners, local game shop employees, anybody who just wants more information about the game or wants to see how Roll of Fate is going to be pushing out product. Whatever questions you have, that's what that Developer Summit is there for. And our first Developer Summit will be coming up on August 25th in our Discord, which is, the link is available on our website. Jump into the Discord, be there for the time slot, and I think we actually have it set up as an event. So hop on in, check out the time, and if you can make it and you got questions, come on in and ask whatever you've got.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Zane. Thank you for talking us through all of this and for showing Roll of Fate. Massive good luck to you with the launch. As he said, if you want to find links to the Kickstarter campaign and the website where you can pre-order stuff, that will be in the description of the video below. You can also find more of us here on Dicebreaker by hitting subscribe, clicking the like icon, and clicking that bell icon to get notified whenever we put a new video live. You can also find us on dicebreaker.com, where we've actually got a couple of articles up on Roll of Fate as well. We'll have links to that in the description too. And if you head on over to dicebreaker.com/subscribe, we actually have a membership program where, on top of things like ad-free viewing and exclusive content, if you sign up for the year, you can get discounted tickets, and that includes tickets to PAX Unplugged, where Roll of Fate will be launching. So we'll see you on the next video. Thank you very much for watching. But until then, have a lovely day. Goodbye.